10 minutes of unbroken walking can drastically cut your risk of dying from any cause. Not 10,000 steps. Not an intense workout. 10 minutes, walk without stopping. And almost every fitness video skips the one detail that makes this work at all. It's not how many steps you take. It's whether you ever stop moving long enough for your body to notice. Here's the mechanism, and once you see it, you'll understand why this number isn't random. Meet Greg. Greg is 46, works in insurance in Atlanta, and by every reasonable definition takes care of himself. He takes the stairs. He walks to his car. He paces during conference calls. By the end of most days, his watch says 6,000 steps, and he feels like he's done something. But almost none of those steps lasted more than 3 minutes before he sat back down, answered an email, or got pulled into the next call. Greg wasn't failing at exercise. Nobody had ever told him that scattered movement and continuous movement are two completely different signals to his body, and his body was treating them that way the entire time. A groundbreaking study tracked over 33,000 adults and found something strange. 2 people could walk the exact same number of steps in a day and end up with completely different health outcomes, based purely on how those steps were arranged. Same steps. Different results. Researchers took people who weren't especially active, fewer than 8,000 steps a day, which is most of us, and split their walking into different patterns. They found that those who got their movement in unbroken stretches of 15 minutes or longer saw a staggering reduction in all-cause mortality over the 10-year study period compared to people getting the identical step count in scattered pieces. For the least active people, introducing these continuous blocks slashed their relative risk of dying by up to 80%. Think of it like charging your phone. Plug it in for 30 seconds, unplug it, plug it back in all day. That Windows-shopped electricity barely moves the battery. Plug it in for 20 minutes straight, and something real happens. Your body runs on the same logic. Greg's short, scattered movement was barely registering. One sustained walk actually triggers change. And almost nobody is talking about why. Here's the part that explains it at the cellular level, the piece most videos on this topic never connect. Inside every muscle cell, you have proteins called GLUT4 transporters. Think of them as small gates that let sugar into the cell. Normally, insulin opens those gates. But when your muscles contract repeatedly, like during sustained walking, those gates start opening on their own through a separate pathway that has nothing to do with insulin at all. Research shows that sustained muscle movement alone increases sugar uptake by roughly 50%, with zero insulin involved. Here's the catch. This pathway doesn't fully activate in short bursts. It needs sustained, repeated contraction to ramp up. If you stop every 2 or 3 minutes, like Greg did between emails, you keep resetting a system that needs continuity to do its best work. This also explains something most advice gets backwards: timing. A study out of Japan compared people walking 10 minutes immediately after eating against people walking 30 minutes starting half an hour later. The 10-minute group, despite doing a third of the total exercise, controlled their blood sugar spike better. Not how long. When. The window where your muscles can intercept rising blood sugar is narrow, and most advice about step counts ignores it completely. But the sugar story is only half of what sustained walking is doing. It also directly rewires your stress response system, known as the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Think of it as your body's internal alarm circuit. When it's triggered, it releases cortisol, your main stress hormone. A small amount, briefly, is normal and useful. The problem is when it stays elevated for hours, because nothing ever signals the alarm to stand down. Researchers studying this directly had people walk outdoors for about 30 minutes, then put them through a deliberately stressful task, public speaking and time math under pressure. The walkers showed a measurably smaller cortisol spike in response to that stressor than people who simply sat beforehand. The walk didn't just feel calming. It changed how their body responded to stress that hadn't even happened yet. This is exactly why Greg's scattered movement, stairs, short walks to the car, pacing during calls, never fully resolved his stress response. A brief, interrupted walk barely engages this system. Sustained movement is what gives your body enough time to shift out of alarm mode and signal that the threat has passed. Stop and start every few minutes, and you're sending mixed signals. Alarm, stand down, alarm again. Stay in motion for the full stretch, and the stand-down signal actually completes. Greg's doctor had flagged his resting heart rate as a little elevated for his activity level at his last 2 checkups. Greg assumed the 6,000 steps were doing their job. They weren't, because the body isn't counting steps. It's reading patterns of sustained effort. But here's where it gets interesting. You don't need more steps. You don't need a gym membership. You need to take movement you're probably already doing and just let it run longer without interrupting it. Same walk. Different shapes. Here's the exact protocol. 1. The unbroken floor, 10 minutes minimum. Once a day, take 1 walk lasting at least 10 minutes without stopping. Not 10 minutes total scattered across your day, 10 minutes in a single unbroken stretch. 15 to 20 minutes is better if you have it, but 10 is the door you need to walk through. 2. The timing intercept, immediately post-meal. Walk right after your largest meal, when possible. Earlier intercepts more of the rising blood sugar than later, giving you maximum metabolic protection with less total walking time. 3. Protect the signal. No phone notifications. Keep this walk free of anything that re-triggers the alarm you're trying to switch off. No stressful calls. No urgent emails mid-walk. A walk spent answering work messages is still movement, but it fights against your nervous system's ability to calm down. 4. Stack higher efforts last, after the walk. If you want to add harder effort, jogging, lifting, or intense exercise, do it after the walk, not before. Your muscles are already warm, blood sugar is managed, and your body handles load much better. Greg started with exactly this. 1 10-minute unbroken walk after lunch, parking further away, so he had no excuse to cut it short, phone face down in his pocket. Here's what the timeline actually looked like for him, and what you should expect. The continuity timeline, days 3 to 5. The first signal, nothing dramatic. Maybe slightly less afternoon heaviness or post-lunch brain fog, which is easy to dismiss as coincidence. Weeks 2 to 3, nervous system shift. Greg noticed his energy stopped crashing around 3 p.m. He felt less reactive in afternoon meetings that used to leave him wound up. His blood sugar was stabilizing, and his HPA axis was finally getting a daily chance to reset. Weeks 4 to 6, cardiovascular adaptation. At his next checkup, Greg's, slightly elevated, resting heart rate node was gone. He hadn't changed his diet. He'd changed nothing except how those 10 minutes were shaped. Month 2, the brain compound. This is where the BDNF piece comes in, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a growth chemical your brain releases during sustained aerobic movement that acts like fertilizer for brain cells. Walking daily means a steady supply of this, compounding quietly in the background. Do this consistently for a year, and your heart works less hard at rest, your post-meal energy stops swinging, and the walk you already take stops being incidental movement and starts being the specific dose your body actually needed. The walk you already take is medicine. You just never knew the correct dose was about continuity, not distance. Before you go, let's look at your own routine. How many minutes total do you think you spend walking without stopping on an average day? Not your total step count, just unbroken minutes. Drop your estimate in the comments below. If you want the science behind what your body is actually doing, explained simply, every single week. Subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next video. That's the only thing we do here.